So let's be clear, we're talking about language such as globalise, the intifada.
Yeah.
That said, even 2 years ago, was frequently held by the Crown Prosecution Service not to meet the threshold. But the point about the threshold is it's not a fixed thing. It's something that's tethered to context. And if the context changes, then that threshold test changes. And we simply came to the view that, remember that we had, of course, the dreadful atrocity on the streets of Manchester, where we had people murdered purely for being Jewish. By dint of awful coincidence, we also started, it is now, of course, concluded, and you see that we have 3 men convicted of very serious offences and rightly have very severe penalties imposed upon them. Those people were planning a terrorist attack in exactly the same community, in exactly the same location. And we had the Bondi example as well. And it seemed to us that the juxtaposition of all of those things meant that practically you've just got to accept that, particularly from the perspective of the Jewish community in Manchester, and that's my concern. I'm the Chief Constable of Manchester. I look after the people of all the people of Manchester. But Jewish people in Manchester found themselves in a position where they were living in great fear, and that fear is justified. And that's important. And so it seemed to me that when people will talk about many uses of the word intifada, and at its narrowest, I'm not an expert on the etymology of everything, but I do know that actually applied, and with all due respect, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but the word intifada in very common usage can be quite a benign phrase. It is throwing something off, dealing with something, whatever. But it just seemed that in this context, talking about globalizing the intifada is very specifically oriented toward, what some would say is the struggle of the Palestinian people against oppressors. Other people would say, no, this is about a politically inspired group of people who are committing murder, in Israel and what have you. In a sense, that's not my concern. What's my concern is what is perceived by people in Manchester. And essentially, you've got people saying, hang on, people are stood in the streets saying globalise the intifada, and that is practically what is happening. And as a result, we feel terribly fearful. That's why that recalibration comes in.
Yeah,